Pick your poison. Who you going to double team? Grady Jarrett or Calais Campbell? Either way, you're gonna lose.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
So guys, you know me, I'm Aaron Freeman, aka Mr. Drew, aka Sirius Black, and of course, your very humble host of this illustrious Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast as your first listen each and every day. And of course, check us out on your Roku and Amazon Fire TV by downloading the Locked On Sports Atlanta app on your Roku or Amazon Fire TV. So later in the episode, I will be giving you my projected starting lineup for not only the Atlanta Falcons on the football field, but also on the baseball diamond, representing opening day, right? So we'll be talking about the 25 or so players that should be starting for the team in week 1 in September, and also the 9 players that, to me, at least, if I was basically picking my best batting lineup, not necessarily fielding, because we're not going to put 300-pounders out there to try to turn double plays and whatnot, but the 9 players that I would, sort of embody what I'm looking for from a batting lineup on a football field, that sort of thing. So hopefully that'll become clear later in the episode, but we'll kick things off with Kevin Oestreicher of the Locked On Ravens podcast, talking about Calais Campbell, how he fits with Grady Jarrett. And of course, we got to pick Kevin's brain on, the ongoing Lamar Jackson saga. So without further ado, let's jump into that conversation right now. All right, everyone, we are back with another illustrious guest. He is the host of the Locked On Ravens podcast, Kevin Oestreicher, and he is here to join us to talk about the latest Atlanta Falcons pickup, none other than Calais Campbell, who spent the last 3 years with the Baltimore Ravens. Kevin, my friend, welcome to the show.
I appreciate you having me on there, and yeah, I think it's a great signing for the Falcons. I'm bummed out he's not going to be back in Baltimore, both for on and off the field reasons. Great person, great player, and still has it. Year 16, he still has it. Don't get it twisted. He's still a player in this league and a very good one.
Absolutely. So talk to the people on what Calais Campbell brought to the field for the Baltimore Ravens and obviously what you think he can bring to the field for the Atlanta Falcons.
Yeah, well, for Baltimore, Campbell was definitely the veteran presence in the middle of that defense, someone who knew what he was doing at all times, knew his assignment, and he commanded attention. He's such a big guy on the field. He's a monster of a man. And so he demanded a lot of double teams and a lot of attention from opposing offenses. And I think that was one of the beauties of what he could help out with the Ravens defense, especially with second-level guys like a Patrick Queen and a Roquan Smith, freeing them up to make a ton of stops and a ton of tackles. And there was a clear difference in the Ravens run defense when Campbell was in versus when he was out. He had a couple of nagging little injuries here and there that caused him to miss a couple games. And I think we saw the difference of what this Ravens run defense was both with and without Calais Campbell. It was much better with Campbell in there. Still a very good run defender. And as a pass rusher too, didn't put up quite the sack numbers in Baltimore that he did in Jacksonville or even Arizona, but he still has it there too. He's at 99 sacks right now. He's made it very clear that he really, really wants 100 sacks. So even before the Ravens released him, I assumed he was going to come back to try to get that milestone. He's wanted that since he was a little kid. But now going into Atlanta, I think it's a great situation for him. He'll be able to produce there, help out that defense that has obviously added a lot of pieces over there in Atlanta. I think an offseason headlined by players like Jesse Bates and Calais Campbell and other really good pieces as well makes that defense very formidable. And for Campbell, what he was able to do in Baltimore was to prove to the rest of the league that, yeah, no, he's getting older and he's getting up there in age, he is still one of the better defensive linemen in this league. And I think that's super impressive considering where he is age-wise. A lot of people by that age already are retired for years, but Campbell's still doing it, and he's doing it at a high level.
Now, you talked a little bit about sort of freeing up other guys, and I know that's music to the ears of someone like Grady Jarrett, who has been basically living every snap to snap being doubled and occasionally even triple teamed these last couple of years, just because no one really believed in any other pass rusher for the Atlanta Falcons. And I imagine that won't be the case now with guys like Calais Campbell and David Onyemata that they added this offseason, as well as, you know, other players like Arnold Ebiketie that they drafted a year ago. Do you feel like, you know, if you're game planning against the Atlanta Falcons, who's the more formidable guy that you feel like you got to get multiple bodies on? Is it Calais Campbell, or is it still kind of Grady Jarrett in your eyes?
Yeah, I wouldn't want to have that problem if I'm a offense trying to scheme up how to protect those guys. I think for me, Jarrett's probably the better player by a small margin, but that's not a shot at Calais Campbell. Like, I still think Campbell's very, very good. And that's a great problem to have if you're the Falcons, to say, hey, you know what? Now we have two of these guys on this defensive line and other depth pieces as well that are really good. So try to stop that. And that, to me, is where I think this Falcons defense will be able to improve this season, because having a guy like Campbell, again, I mentioned the freeing up of other guys, both first, second, even some third level guys, if you want to bring guys up the middle there. Campbell's someone who, if you leave him one-on-one, that's a pretty big risk to take because of how he still can get to the quarterback, generate pressure, and free up that space for guys to work. So I think for me, even though I think Jarrett's probably the little bit of a better player at this point, a little younger than Campbell as well, I still think if you have to game plan for both Grady Jarrett and Calais Campbell, it's not going to be an easy task to stop both of those guys, especially if you leave one of them one-on-one, they can make you pay for it.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the Falcon fans certainly looking forward to that. And Kevin, since I have you here, I got to talk to you about the quarterback in Baltimore, who's been linked to the Atlanta Falcons. It seems clear that I don't think you have to worry about the Atlanta Falcons coming in and taking Lamar Jackson. But I'm just curious, sort of, what's going on with that situation, at least from the Ravens perspective.
Yeah, it's been an off season, I'll tell you that much. There's little twists and turns every single day. You know, Meek Mill getting in the picture with the Patriots, and you never really know what's going to happen. But Lamar requesting that trade, he makes it public that he requested it on March 2nd. I think really to drum up pressure, drum up interest from other teams. This, to me, I think is a money thing as opposed to an organizational thing where he just doesn't like the Ravens. I don't think that's what he is fine with the organization. I feel like where if the Ravens would have come to him tomorrow and say, hey, Lamar, we're going to reach your asking price, he'd say, all right, cool. But he believes he's clearly worth a certain number. The Ravens, and I guess other teams throughout the league as well, clearly have what they believe he's worth. And reportedly the Lamar starting points in contract negotiations are a non-starter at the owners meeting. So one side's going to have to budge here or there, but then you kind of mentioned the Falcons, and that's a team that I think a lot of people had naturally linked Lamar to because of the fact, well, for multiple reasons, but the fact that, one, they have some cap space to at least work with a little bit here where some teams don't. But then you hear the comments from Arthur Blank, and seems like it's not an option for the Falcons. And then you hear, Jim Irsay say he's not believing in fully guaranteed contracts. Other teams saying they're good with their quarterback. So it's just been, I guess it's been weird just how little interest there's been in Lamar. I get the contract thing. I get you have to give up assets to get him as well. But for some of these teams, I'm not saying Desmond Ritter is going to be a bad quarterback. I actually really like him, and I really like his potential. But it just depends where these teams are. Do they want to kind of roll with the young guy and have him on the rookie contract and see how they can grow in this offense? I think we saw some nice moments from them late, the Falcons, especially in that Ravens game. I was impressed with Desmond Ritter and Tyler Algier and Drake London. Or do you want to have the proven option in Lamar, but you have to pay him the huge contract and give up the assets? So at this point, it seems to me like Lamar's best option is coming back to Baltimore, at least for 2023. But obviously, this is a trade request. I don't think it's necessarily him asking out and saying, do whatever you can to get me out of Baltimore. But at the same time, I think we still have a long way to go, and that could hinder what the Ravens do, and already has hindered what the Ravens have done this offseason. Their only free agent acquisition as to this point has been Nelson Aguilar, and they've had to move on from guys like Calais Campbell because Lamar Jackson is on that $32.4 million fully guaranteed franchise tag right now. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm locked on Lamar Jackson. That's pretty much what my show is now instead of Locked On Ravens, because that's pretty much all we talk about. So a resolution hopefully coming soon, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, been checking out the show, and yeah, definitely Locked On Lamar Jackson. I think you got several more months of Locked On Lamar Jackson before you can actually talk about Ravens football, but I'm sure you got the people covered on that front. Let the people know where they can find your stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You can find me over on Twitter, Oestreicher34. Also, Locked On Ravens, like Locked On Falcons, 5 days a week on the Locked On Podcast Network. So you can subscribe for free anywhere on YouTube, audio form, wherever. Also, I am managing editor for the Ravens Wire. So I also write about Lamar Jackson 7 times a day. It seems like 7 days a week. So Lamar, Ravens from me here.
There you go. So, guys, of course, we still have more to come on today's episode. Appreciate Kevin for joining us. And we'll get into a listener question who asked me about the Falcons' projected starting lineup for week 1 this year. And later in the episode, we'll get into the baseball lineup, guys. But before we get there, I do have to let you guys know that I'm very upset right now, because I went earlier today to visit BuiltMarchMadness.com to vote for my favorite Built Bar flavor. And I saw, with now the second round of voting commencing, that my champion coconut brownie chunk lost in the first round to brownie batter puff, and now my bracket is busted. And so I'm upset, and I'm going to go console myself by ordering myself a box of coconut brownie chunk over at built.com. I'm going to use the promo code LOCKEDON15, and I'm going to get 15% off. And I also might wind up finding my way down to Walmart for a 4-bar box of Built Bars, or Sam's Club for a 13-bar box of Built Bars as part of my consolation prize, and get, still remaining flavors like peanut butter brownie or double chocolate. But I will not be getting brownie batter puff, though. I will not be voting for that flavor at BuiltMarchMadness.com. I know some of you guys, out of spite for me, for your disdain for me, are going to go to BuiltMarchMadness.com and vote for brownie batter puff or any of the other 7 remaining flavors now that it's an Elite 8. But I tell you, no, it is not an Elite 8. It's an Elite 7 and 1 fraud in brownie batter puff. Right? They're the Minnesota Vikings of Built Bars. And I know Luke Braun is sitting there of Locked On Vikings, like, why are the Vikings catching strays when you're doing an ad read, Aaron? But I'm upset by this. I'm sorry. And I'm just lashing out. Right? And the only thing that can console me is that delicious protein bar that tastes like a candy bar that's covered in 100% real chocolate. It's low in sugar, it's low in calories, but it has a whopping 17 grams of protein. So make sure you go and show brownie batter puff the door by going to BuiltMarchMadness.com right now to vote for your favorite non-brownie batter puff flavor. Pick up a box while you're there. And of course, you can vote every day. So hop in and support your favorite flavor. So continuing today's episode, guys, we have a listener question from the Discord from Rise Up. He says, hey, Aaron, if the season started today, what do you think the Falcons starting lineup would be? Thank you. So I'm going to answer this question from a more literal and technical standpoint, because I'm going to project who I think will be on the field for the very first snap at certain positions, because that is technically who starts. But I'll make note of when there's an instance where, okay, this player might be on the field for the first snap, but someone else might get the majority of the snaps at this position. But starting off, obviously, with the quarterback position, Desmond Ritter would be the starter if there was a game today. And then when you look at the rest of the Falcons starting lineup at the skill positions, given that the Falcons tended to start with 12 personnel, and for those of you that don't know, that's 2 tight end sets. And a reminder for those of you, when you hear those numbers that I throw around quite a bit on the podcast, the first number refers to the number of running backs, the second number to the number of tight ends. So 12 personnel is 1 running back, 2 tight ends. 21 is 2 running backs, 1 tight end. 22, 2 running backs, 2 tight ends. 13 is 1 running back, 3 tight ends. And 11 is 1 running back, 1 tight end. That's your standard 3 wide receiver set. It's standard everywhere in the NFL except for in Atlanta, because the Falcons basically refuse to play that. And, you can always tell the number of wide receivers based off of subtracting, adding up those 2 numbers and then subtracting it from 5. So 11 would be 1 + 1 = 2. Subtract that from 5. That's 3 wide receivers. So on and so forth. So given that the Falcons' tendency was to start in 12 personnel, the 1 running back would probably be Tyler Allgeier. Although the thing that was interesting to me last year was that the Falcons, even in the latter half of the season when Allgeier was playing as well as he was and was the team's leading rusher during that time, Cordero Patterson was starting the majority of those games, getting those first few snaps on the opening series, which led to us complaining a little bit in a couple of those games. Like, why are we waiting to like the 4th play, the 5th play, the 6th play in our scripted 15 plays to get Tyler Allgeier the football, given how well he's played? So that would be an interesting wrinkle, but I would assume that the Falcons would be moving forward with Tyler Allgeier, getting those opening game scripts the 2 tight ends as part of this 12 personnel set, I would assume the majority of weeks would be Kyle Pitts and Parker Hesse, just because the Falcons will want to present, let's run the football and then run play action off of that. Although you probably get a healthy mix of games where it's Jonnu Smith. It will just kind of depend on the game plan, the matchup, those sorts of things, who that second tight end. But you can pretty much expect Kyle Pitts to be one of those guys. And then the 2 receivers at this point would probably be Drake London and Mac Hollins, although, we'll see if Scotty Miller can make a play there at that point, given similar what Olamide Zaccheaus was, that number 2 guy, and Scotty Miller we're expecting to be in the same role as Ozzy was a year ago. Your offensive line, no surprises there. Left tackle would be Jake Matthews. The left guard would be Matt Hennessy. If the season started today, Drew Dahlman at center, right guard Chris Lindstrom, right tackle Caleb McGarry. Defensively is more of a guess, right? I feel pretty good about projecting the offense just because we don't 100% know exactly what type of scheme and fronts the Falcons are going to use. I'm for now going to assume a nickel defense because the Falcons are going to play that probably 65 to 70% of the time. So chances are pretty good that the opening snap of a game, they will be in their nickel defense. And I'm going to assume for the time being a 4-2-5 look on that nickel. And so I would have defensive end Calais Campbell, defensive tackles being Grady Jarrett and David Onyemata, and with the other defensive end probably being Lorenzo Carter to start games. But this would probably be another example of Arnold Ebiketie getting more run because I would expect the Falcons to want to feature AK in the passing situations as a pass rusher more than Lorenzo Carter moving forward. So that would be my guess for the 4 guys up front. The 2 linebackers, the Mike or middle linebacker would be Troy Anderson. The will or weak side linebacker would be Caden Ellis. If the Falcons were to play a 3rd linebacker, a Sam or strong side linebacker, when they play their base defense, my guess would be Michael Walker would get the nod at this point in time in that role, similar to how he played that role in his rookie season here in Atlanta under Dan Quinn. But there's also part of me that wonders maybe that's a role that the Falcons envision D'Angelo Malone playing moving forward. So that's one of those interesting wrinkles that we don't quite know about. The cornerbacks would be AJ Terrell and Casey Hayward. The nickel cornerback, the slot player, I think would be D. Alford. I think there will be a competition between him and Mike Hughes, and I lean towards D. Alford winning that competition. But certainly because Mike Hughes is making like $3 million and D. Alford's making the veteran minimum, I understand why people think that's Mike Hughes' job to lose. Usually, the higher paid guys tend to get the benefit of the doubt in NFL locker rooms and with the coaching staff. And then the 2 safeties, strong safety, I guess, if you want to distinguish between them, let's say Richie Grant's the strong safety, Jesse Bates is the free safety, and then, of course, Younghoe Koo's the kicker, Bradley Pinion's the punter, and Liam, the Highlander McCullough would be the long snapper. So I hope that answers your question. Rise up and we'll continue the conversation talking about starting lineups, where we will talk about the 9 players that I would pick to be my starting lineup in baseball 1 through 9. We'll break that down as we continue today's Locked On Falcons, guys. But before we get there, I do want to plug, since baseball season, since it is topical, go check out the Locked On Braves podcast on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. So the NCAA tournament has already heated up and it's about to start winding down. Of course, baseball season is about to kick off. And of course, this is the perfect time to head on over to FanDuel, America's #1 sports book. New customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That means if your first bet doesn't win, you get bonus bets back. So there is no sweat, right? You can't lose, basically. And all you got to do is to take advantage of that is head on over to FanDuel.com/lockon to sign up and claim your no sweat first bet. And you can wager on anything from money line to points scored to threes drained in basketball, and whatever it is. I think you can do some interesting thing in baseball. I'm always not betting on baseball, so I'll have to go over to FanDuel.com to find out exactly what I can do with baseball, what interesting wrinkles they have for baseball. And you can do it on the app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So don't miss your chance for a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you join FanDuel today. Head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. So let's wrap up today's episode picking 9 players that I would have my batting lineup, my starting lineup for baseball. And clearly, as you guys well know, as you can tell, I'm deep into baseball. I'm a big believer in baseball. And so this is definitely my wheelhouse. I've been waiting all day, all year long to do this. But I will do my best. So, I wanted to, my methodology with this is just focusing on the batting lineup, not necessarily who's going to play first base and in center field and all that stuff, because I'm not going to have 300 pounders out there. But I was thinking about it from like, what do they like in terms of how you pick a batter, like, your power hitter, your leadoff hitter, that sort of thing. Sort of the players that embody that more on the football field, not necessarily the guys I think and can actually hit a baseball, right? There's probably very few players on the Falcons roster that can actually hit a Major League Baseball, because probably only a handful of these guys actually play baseball in high school. But let's kick off. You'll understand once I start explaining it. So my leadoff hitter, right? I need to get someone who's reliable, but also has some speed. And so basically I'm looking at the skill position players. And to me, AJ Terrell really jumped out, given that the Falcons don't necessarily have a ton of Blazers on their roster. And so to me, it was an obvious choice for AJ Terrell. Very reliable cover corner. That's sort of reliability I imagine can translate to him being, pretty consistent at getting on base. Not going to, be batting 1,000 or anything like that. I don't know what his on base percentage would be, but something I think relatively high given what we know AJ Terrell is capable of. Number 2 is going to be another reliable hitter, or another reliable option that I can count on each and every week to play really well. And part of me wanted to go with, go with a curveball here, pun intended, and go with Jake Matthews, who I think is super underrated, but I had to go with one of his line mates, and that was Chris Lindstrom, right? Lindstrom, just reliable, solid, all the things. We know how good he is. He's $105 million, or really, I think it's $112 million richer, today than he was a month ago, for the reasons of that reliability. You're not paying that type of money for someone who's not going to get on base, so to speak. And then number 3 was the guy that often lines up across from Chris Lindstrom, at least in practice, and that's Grady Jarrett. Grady Jarrett's our guy. This is my most reliable hitter. This is the guy that I expect that, if the first 2 guys, of AJ Terrell and Chris Lindstrom, strike out, I need this guy to get on base, and Grady Jarrett is going to be my most reliable guy, my featured player. He's the guy that, sacked Tom Brady and came through with a number of clutch plays at the end of games last year, and that's my number 3 hitter. Now we get to the 4th spot. That's going to be my power guy, right? And of course, given the topic of today, Calais Campbell, you got to go with the big, powerful guy, the 6'8", 300-pounder that's going to, he's tossing guards around and tackles and whatnot. So I imagine he can, knock a few homers down. There just isn't too many Falcon players that truly embody, reliability and power. Caleb McGarry, not quite there. Parker Hesse, part of me was like, okay, he's a great run blocker. Does that translate to power? If we had that type of enforcer like Keanu Neal used to be on defense, maybe I would pick that guy, but we don't necessarily really have that guy. Maybe if we get a dominant bull rusher, a Tyree Wilson perhaps, or someone like that, Keon White, someone like that, that would make sense as the cleanup hitter. But for the time being, it is Calais Campbell. Number 5 is another power guy. That is Tyler Algier for me, right? He's the guy that also embodies power on this team. I've called Tyler Algier a grinder of a running back. He's the guy that on 3rd and 2, he's going to slam it in there. So he's the guy for me at that number 5 spot after Calais Campbell. Number 6. And this is going to be interesting because a year from now, I wonder where, if we do this exercise again a year from now, where this player will be. And that's with Jesse Bates, the Falcons safety. He could be much higher. He could be my leadoff guy a year from now. I just couldn't pick him higher in the lineup just because he hasn't proven himself here in Atlanta. He's obviously proven a lot in Cincinnati. I'm imagining that's going to translate here in Atlanta. But, had to keep him here. So I have the confidence that Jesse Bates is going to be high. So I went with him at number 6. And then number 7, I went with old reliable Jake Matthews, right? And this is where I'm going to give Jake Matthews his love because he doesn't get enough love from certain sectors of Falcon fans. I think in part because they're still butthurt about his performance in a game that was played 6 years ago. And then I think it's from there's another section of Falcon fans that just don't understand offensive line play and, will give him grief from time to time because he'll give up a sack every now and then. Now, say Jake is super reliable, right? Since I think that the stat is since 2017, there have been 11 different left guards that have started a game next to Jake Matthews. And yet Jake Matthews has played his best football since 2017, and he never gets help. He never gets chips. They don't slide protections to him. He's on an island, right? We talk about Caleb McGarry Island. Jake Matthews Island has existed for like 6 years. We don't talk about it. It's been a reliable 4-star resort for like 6 years, but we don't talk about it. Nobody visits it. No one gives it a claim, and I'm giving it the love it is right now. I want to give it more love. As I said earlier, I wanted to put it at the 2 spot, but I'm going to settle for the 7 spot just because I don't want to disrespect Chris Lindstrom like that. This man just get paid $112 million. So like, yeah, that's kind of there's 112 million reasons, 112 half million reasons why I think Chris Lindstrom deserves a little bit more love at this point to Jake Matthews. But I wanted to give Jake Matthews his flowers at the 7 spot. And then this next pick was really hard for me because I already knew I was going to pick Desmond Ritter to be 9, spoiler alert. And so now I'm stuck. Okay, who am I put for this last spot? And I have Kyle Pitts and I have Drake London. And I went with Kyle Pitts. And I'm sorry, Drake. And I know Drake London is the type of dude that he's going to be the Michael Jordan meme and he's going to take this personally. And I apologize, Drake, ahead of you. But I just went with Kyle Pitts just because of the upside. And frankly, because like Drake London had 3 fumbles last year. So I just don't know if I can always rely on him to the degree that I do. Like we all sat here and be like, get Kyle Pitts the football all last year. And when we did, good things happened. And so, he's 8th here, not because he doesn't have the talent to be, in the top 3 or 4 of this lineup, but just simply we haven't seen the consistency enough like we have with some of the other players that I've put higher in it. It's just they are consistently, like when I'm popping on the film each and every week, like they're producing every single week, and we just haven't gotten that level with Kyle Pitts. I'm hoping that we see more of that this year. So my bad, Drake London. I apologize for leaving you off, but as I said earlier, with the 9 spot, I am going with Desmond Ritter, the traditional pitcher spot. So if we were doing positions, he would be the pitcher, obviously, and he's got the most to prove, right? Like we want Desmond Ritter to be higher in the lineup. We want him to be, more than the 9th or 10th most reliable player on the Falcons roster, obviously, because the Falcons are showing a lot of faith in him. And he's got a target on his back, right? People are dogging Desmond Ritter, right? It's been tough. Like, and you know me, I'm not usually the guy that gets bent out of shape when other people say negative things about the Atlanta Falcons or their players. I value my opinion. I don't really care what other people think about stuff. If I want your opinion, I'll ask for it. But like now I'm like I'm starting to collect receipts on the people dogging the Falcons, people dogging Desmond Ritter and acting like he's a bum and all this stuff. So I'm like Drake London. I'm gonna take this personally moving forward. So Desmond Ritter is my 9 spot. Drake London can be my top pinch hitter and whatnot. And I'm sure there are plenty of other players that you guys would think would make better fits. And of course, I would love your feedback. Tell me why my lineup is terrible, why your lineup would be different. You can, of course, send them via email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com. You can hit me up in the Discord, the link in the description below for Locked On Falcons. You can leave a comment here on the Locked On Falcons YouTube channel, or you can hit me up on social media at Locked On Falcons via Facebook or Twitter as well. And those are also the same places where you can hit me up for the mailbag that we're going to do on Monday, and I'll give you a heads up unless something crazy happens that derails this plan. We'll probably be talking about Devon Witherspoon, the cornerback from Illinois. I've been teasing it all week long, talking about I'm not as high on Devon Witherspoon as I once was after watching more film. So we'll get into that on Monday, Mock Draft Monday. And of course, if anything else breaks for the Atlanta Falcons, we can talk about that as well. So please provide your feedback on this baseball lineup. Send in any questions that you want to have answered on the mailbag portion of Mock Draft Monday, and continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen each and every day. And for your second listen, in addition to Locked On Braves, in addition to Locked On Sports Atlanta, Locked On Bulldogs, Locked On Hawks, all that and more, make sure you check out the Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes podcast, where Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino are taking you through what it takes to build a successful NFL franchise. Subscribe to Locked On NFL Scouting with the Draft Dudes wherever you get your podcasts, and on YouTube. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, guys. Your team every